We live in a society full of catches, read the fine print. And especially with consolidated billing, there truly aren't drawbacks.
What makes community solar really work? Program design matters, as anyone who has followed the development of Minnesota's policy over the past decade can attest. But joining me in June 2026, 3 members of the Community Solar Outreach Team at Cooperative Energy Futures explain how the conversation at the door may matter just as much in ensuring that community solar reaches the folks who can benefit the most. Sebastian Rivera, Kyle Samajima, and Bryn Shank discussed their outreach to residents of mobile home communities in Minnesota and how a clear explanation, trusted community members, and key policies came together to make it work. I'm John Farrell, Director of the Energy Democracy Initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and this is Local Energy Rules, a podcast about monopoly power, energy democracy, and how communities can take charge to transform the energy system. A quick disclosure before we launch in. I'm a subscriber to a Cooperative Energy Futures Solar Garden and a cooperative investor, which I hope reflects well on my belief that this ownership model delivers good outcomes for its members. Kyle and Sebastian and Bryn, welcome to Local Energy Rules.
Thanks for having us, John.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with helping people understand, what does it mean for the residents of these mobile home communities to have access to community solar and to be able to subscribe to a project when otherwise they might not be able to have solar?
So I think one very interesting part of going into a mobile home or manufacturer community is the fact that our cooperative model fits very well within their housing model. I think one of the biggest barriers of where they're living is the housing itself. Often their housing stock is older. Most of the time, the individuals own the home, but not the land on it. Therefore, putting solar panels or trying to generate hefty energy from solar in that type of structure is really not ideal. Therefore, having a community solar garden that is nearby, or just a community solar garden program in general that comes into a community like that, is perfect. The model is almost built for communities like that because it's made for individuals that have energy burdens like these folks. It's made for individuals that sometimes may not have the capacity or may not in general have the capacity of having solar directly on the roof, which they also qualify under that. And for us, we, as a cooperative, we truly want to build communities, I guess, understanding and ownership within their communities. So bringing a co-op to them makes them feel like they're actually a part of something that is bigger and also that resembles how they live and how they share things within their own community. So yeah, I think having a community solar garden is a perfect model to be introduced into a community like that.
I mean, and besides that, the obvious benefit of reducing electricity costs, and as is noted on our notes here, it reduces the risk of disconnection, and especially at those most vulnerable times when it's very hot and very cold. If people have electric heat, a lot of times, this housing stock is not well insulated. And so their electric bills are very hefty, probably disproportionately so compared to most housing stock. And they can participate in solar without needing that hefty amount of money up front, without needing to replace their roof, all the things that come as prerequisites for participating. And there's absolutely a lot more we can say as we talk about this more, about the different benefits and why we focus on manufactured home parks.
I did an interview with Jeannie Oliver on a previous Local Energy Rules podcast. She is an employee supporting mobile home parks in New Hampshire. They call them resident-owned communities because the folks who are in those mobile homes actually own the land under them as well. Are the subscribers that you've worked with in Cimarron and Landfall also landowners? And then does that matter much in being able to deliver them community solar?
Well, Landfall, neither Cimarron nor Landfall are cooperatives. We do work with other, like Woodlawn Terrace Cooperative down in Richfield is a community member owned manufactured home park. Park Plaza is as well. It's a rock, they call them, a resident owned community. Landfall is very unique in that it's its own town. And they became incorporated. They actually got their independence last year, paying off all their debt. And they started out as a kind of self-made affordable community by the original landowner. And then gradually more and more people started to live on the land who needed an affordable place to live. And now it is, when you first move into Landfall, you have to be below a certain income. You have to be income qualified to move in there. Now, of course, if you go up in income, you get to stay. So they have a tight-knit community there as this town of manufactured homes. And so I think there's definitely a deeper sense of belonging, commitment, and I think that plays really well with cooperatives and the cooperative model as we go into either cooperatively owned, community member owned manufactured home parks or things like Landfall. And just to reiterate that cooperative energy futures, its net worth is controlled by users of our service, not investors, but users of our service like Landfall and Cimarron, Park Plaza, Woodlawn Terrace Cooperative community members. And so it's just a deeply fair and mutually beneficial way to do this kind of work.
Yeah, I would say, I listened to that podcast and it was pretty interesting. And just kind of what we have seen in our manufactured home outreach is that like all these parks are different and how they're structured are all different, and how you kind of gear your outreach is dependent on that. So kind of Kyle was talking about the uniqueness of Landfall. At Cimarron, it's like totally the opposite. They are owned by this owner and they've not had the best relationship with the park owner and kind of management. And so we had to kind of take a different approach of working more directly with the residents, where at Landfall, we were able to work with the mayor and some of the like staff and things like that.
City council.
Yeah, city council, and they were able to help us with that. So I would say, I think owning the land could have helped, I think. But I don't think it's necessary. But if I'm remembering correctly from that podcast, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, they were like able to build in the savings into like lot rent decreases or something like that. So I think that would have been cool because, we definitely heard from people, lot rents are on the rise. And that was a difference too between Landfall and Cimarron, is those lot rents at Landfall were much more reasonable and they were, decided and voted on, where at Cimarron it was kind of just out of their control. But I think if we could have tied that to the lot rent directly, that would have been cool. But I think people still understood the benefit of the program, especially like Kyle mentioned at Sebastian, that these homes have really high energy costs just in general. So just savings on their energy bills was good too. So
Yeah. Why would you say that Cooperative Energy Futures focuses on community solar participants like those that live in Cimarron and Landfall? Do you find that there are many other solar developers that are, intentionally inviting lower income participants to subscribe?
No.
All right, we got that one done.
I'll take the first part of that, I guess, but then I'll hand it off to Sebastian and Kyle. I think what CF does really well is we do focus on the local aspect of it. So when we built that project in Lake Elmo, we looked immediately and we're like, okay, what places around Lake Elmo could benefit from this? Where I don't know. Now, obviously, I can't speak for other developers, but like, I don't know if they're doing that per se. I think they just care that their projects are built more. And I'll let maybe Sebastian talk to this a little bit more, but like we want to make sure it's accessible. There's like moderate income and then low income, and there's the rules and kind of also what we think is real accessibility and real savings. And we're trying to do that extra mile. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that, Sebastian.
Yeah, we can start by talking about the garden itself. And the truth is that there are some incentive for cooperative energy futures when it comes to having at least 50% of the community solar gardens being filled up with folks that are below the 80% of the area median income. And so we try our best to always have half of our gardens being filled up by those individuals. But I also think it comes with the cooperative model itself. I have learned and seen this on the ground where communities and individuals at need come up with cooperative ways of co-living and living within their communities. And therefore, when we come into those communities with this model, they feel a sense of belonging just by us explaining how the cooperative works. Because they already operate in that sense most of the time due to their needs. And on top of that, we are providing a service that helps them in their need. So the model itself kind of like engulfs them. Another easy to miss point is that our membership cost is very low. It's $25 to become a member, $25 one time in your life. And that cost makes it very accessible for individuals to become a member. And then if folks really don't have the ability to pay that, we also have different ways of paying that $25, making it even more accessible for those very, very low income folks.
I mean, and CEF was created, our structure and approach was started in order to make what typically had been inaccessible accessible. Even community solar previously, people checked credit score, people required a minimum income, people didn't do the relationship building and the trust building to kind of get people to sign up. I mean, because yes, the threshold for Minnesota is now 150% of the area median income. That doesn't mean people can afford solar on their house if they're at 150% of area median income, but it's also not low income. And so I think a lot of the solar developers, to abide by the program rules in Minnesota, they do go below that to get the required number of eligible subscribers, to qualify. But that's been our goal and our approach all along before the legislation required those things. And so I think it's really important too. We've had feedback from manufactured home parks who they have had, unfortunately, too many unscrupulous people knocking on their doors. In fact, they've called us to say, are they allowed to do that? Can we get a sign from you that says, stay away from us? I mean, we've had to call police because people would leave, these door knockers. And that's it's unfortunately, it doesn't help in building trust, when companies do that. So we really have done the work of building the trust and the relationships.
When we were working within Cimarron and Landfall, there was already more eyes movement happening throughout the metro, and the communities were a lot more heightened about ICE presence and safety within the community. So one thing that we did, that was something that we did pretty much on a weekly basis, was on Monday or at the beginning of the week, we would text everyone that we are going to go see during that week for signups or that are in process when it comes to the community solar garden. And so that way we would ensure that there is trust and also ensure that the individuals felt like we were taking care of them in their moment of need and not just showing up in the middle of the day and knocking, knowing that they are all pretty tense in that moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. To give some context for folks who are listening to this, since it's a national podcast, they're of course talking about the Operation Metro Surge that took place in the Twin Cities in Minnesota in early 2026. And so obviously there was a lot of tension in a lot of communities about people walking around your community, people driving into your community. So having that extra touch there obviously would make a huge difference in terms of trust and comfort that people would have with folks coming into their community. When we were talking about the outreach, Kyle, you mentioned that there were that the legislation was passed, I think it was in 2023, that had modified the community solar program. I'm interested to hear, one of the things that's clear from that legislation is that it added some more prescriptive language about making sure that there was greater participation. I think I heard you say a 50% threshold for folks who are 150% of the area median income or below. Correct me if I got that wrong, but what other components of that legislation have potentially helped you bring community solar to mobile home park residents?
Well, it did help that they took away the contiguous county rule. I mean, that's less of a direct benefit, but it really, I think it just opened it up to more community members, period. Because if we have, and we do, whenever we do a community solar garden, we really want community members in that vicinity to feel connection to it, benefit from it. But the fact is that we do fill our community solar gardens with people from all over the state. And of course, the consolidated billing issue, which was not legislative, but, Public Utilities Commission related. Are you familiar, John, with the consolidated billing issue?
I am, but you should explain it for people who might not be familiar.
So previously, people got their bill credit from the amount of energy produced by their share of the community solar garden each month. That would come right on their Excel bill, their electricity bill. They would have to pay us separately out of that savings. They're still always saving, but they had to pay us out of that savings. That was a big barrier for many people who, if you're on the edge financially each month, having an unexpected amount come out of your bank account can be devastating. Consolidated billing that Excel was forced to do means that bill credit and the payment to CEF all happens on their Excel bill. So really all they're feeling is the savings on their bill. Both happen right there. It really is truly a game changer for making the program more accessible. Anything else to add, Brennan, Sebastian?
Yes, I will. I will say so much so, because we started, and this was kind of, and Sebastian can attest to this too, since CEF was like kind of leading the charge, I think, with this new program and new projects. Like, we were some of the first projects that went online under this new program. We knew consolidated billing was coming, but we didn't have very clear guidance on when it was coming or exactly how it was going to look. And we want to be transparent with subscribers. So we were really struggling with, how do we communicate this to people with we know this is what it should be, but we don't know exactly what this is going to be. And so, we had some people where we were trying to explain the two bill thing, but also having to explain to people like, we don't think that's what it's going to be though. And that was pretty confusing and challenging. And I think something I've learned through doing this work is the longer you talk to somebody, the more they're skeptical of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you can't explain this quickly or like get to the points quickly, people start just thinking you're trying to trick them or something. So yeah, like Kyle said, having it just transparently on their bill that they're already used to looking at, that is incredibly helpful. Like Kyle said, there's like cash flow issues sometimes for people. This consolidated billing solves that. And then the other add-on I'll say too is with the extra bill and people who are on energy assistance, there were sometimes challenges with that. If they wanted energy assistance money to go towards paying their community solar invoices, it was incredibly helpful that I didn't have to worry to people about explaining that process and how they tell their providers about how to list cooperative energy futures on their energy assistance applications. Like, you just solve all these problems at once, which was just huge. So, and yeah, to Kyle's point too, the contiguous county thing, like CEF does want to do stuff locally, but in part of our outreach for this program, like, we filled up the Lake Elmo project and we still had people that wanted to subscribe. Like, the demand was high enough. And we were also trying to fill a project in Mankato at the same time. And we could help more people there and put some of them in Mankato. And we would not have been able to do that in years past because of that contiguous county rule. So, yeah, Sebastian, if you got stuff to add.
I guess what I would like to add for the listeners, we are halfway through the podcast, in my opinion, but I would like to just explain how community solar gardens work very quickly. Because for someone that's just listening for the first time, or maybe someone that lives in a manufactured home and would like to learn more about it, they're maybe wondering, how can you live in a location and receive energy benefits from a garden that is in another location or very far from you, right? And so the reason why is because the way that the community solar gardens work is that we essentially give the rights to the energy to all of the owners of this garden, which are all of the subscribers that are subscribed to the garden itself. And as co-op members and subscribers, they are on a monthly basis receiving credits on their energy bill because they are on a monthly basis creating energy through this community solar garden that goes into the grid. And therefore, the owners of that grid, which is Excel Energy, will have to pay for that energy that they are using. So those electrons go into the grid all as long as it's sunny out, and someone has to receive benefits for that, and will be the residents and the owners of the community solar garden, for the residents of the area.
We are going to take a short break. When we come back, I ask my Cooperative Energy Futures guests about why people would turn down a community solar subscription, whether the relationship with subscribers enables them to come back to a community to get more signups, and why this story of serving mobile home residents is important for the Public Utilities Commission to hear about. You're listening to a Local Energy Rules podcast with 3 staff at Cooperative Energy Futures: Outreach Director Kyle Samajima, Outreach Representative Sebastian Rivera, and former Outreach Representative Bryn Shank. Hey, thanks for listening to Local Energy Rules. We're so glad you're here. If you like what you've heard, please help other folks find us by giving the show a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. 5 stars if you think we've earned it. As a bonus, I'll gladly read your review aloud on the show if it includes an energy-related joke or pun. Now, back to the program. Thanks, Sebastian. I appreciate it. That's great. And I also really appreciate the multi-layered impact of consolidated billing. I think for a lot of people, they think of it as just like, oh, it just simplifies things so you don't have 2 bills anymore. But to understand that it can make it easier to do an energy assistance application, it's easier at the door because, as you were saying, Bryn, like, the longer it takes to explain it, the more people are like, wait a second, is this really what I think it is? I just love that there are those like multifaceted benefits. And particularly in terms of the outreach strategy, it's really helpful to know that that is a payoff of helping to get more people into it. Speaking of the conversations you have at the door, I'm kind of curious. People obviously sometimes turn you down. And I'm, why is that? Are there risks that, warn people off of it that are beyond the sort of complexity of trying to help them understand it? What is it that you find that causes people to say, no, even though this would potentially benefit me, I don't want to do it?
We get this so often when we talk to people. It's $25 to join our cooperative. You're a member owner. We share dividends with you when we have them. We're building energy together. You save on your electric bill. And they're first, like, where's the catch? We live in a society full of catches. read the fine print. And especially with consolidated billing, there truly aren't drawbacks. There's no penalty for our program. I can only speak for CEF's program. And Commerce, the Department of Commerce in Minnesota, has done I think, a really good job in making sure that all developers are being scrupulous in providing a program that is fair and transparent and upfront. But so much comes like working at the speed of trust and building relationships and really collaborating with people and not just dashing in, dashing out. I mean, I don't know how many times Bryn and Sebastian went to Landfall and Cimarron and Park Plaza. I mean, we showed up, we were in the community, we brought food, we met with the city council, we got the park manager, she was super excited about what we're doing. So it really is reassuring people. And even so, even with a good reputation and an amazing program, there are still people who will say no. And sometimes people think when their electric bill goes up, that it's because they're on community solar. And sometimes it can be so difficult to explain that that's not the case. But, people get a lot of info thrown at them, a lot of political info, a lot of input on who may be taking advantage of them, et cetera. And so it's unfortunate because people lose out. There truly just aren't drawbacks to participating in this program. They're just, if I'm missing one, anybody let me know, but there's no risk. We don't charge you if you leave. It transfers to another person.
I imagine that's an interesting conversation to have with people, though, because what you can tell them is signing up will definitely mean that you will pay less for energy than you would have otherwise. But you can't promise them that you can do anything about what Xcel Energy is going to do with energy rates, right? Like the utility can go out, to your point, Kyle, they can go out and raise rates on everybody. Your subscription will help mitigate that impact, but it's not going to prevent you from ever having a higher bill again.
Right. But they are also, when they sign up for community solar, they are kind of guaranteeing like a lower rate on their electricity while they're in the community solar program. Like they're kind of pre-buying it. It's a little bit tricky to explain that. I don't want to explain it halfway, but that, yes, we don't have control over what Xcel does. And people always save with this program. And now that's in statute. People have to save. And ours are around 20% savings on their electricity averaged out through the year in a community solar program.
And I think what this reveals is how people have deeply internalized extraction as the default mode of doing business with a utility. And therefore, to them, when they hear utility or when they see something acting like a utility, it must be about extraction and it must be about taking a big chunk of their sustenance most of the time in order for them to have comfort. And therefore, when we come to your house, explain how this is quite easy, very painless, and is giving you the chance of having ownership within an energy system and an energy model that belongs to you, we are throwing too many things that are completely out of their norms. And so they immediately believe that we are going to take. My favorite part of the conversation is when we tell them, oh, I don't need your bank account, or I don't need to see your credit. And you see how they were convinced that I was scamming them and that they were not going to talk to me. But now they are very interested in what we have to offer. And I usually get them completely, I mean, if I'm speaking in Spanish to them, I already got them halfway through the door. But the best way to get them through the door is, hey, if you know anyone that is undocumented, It doesn't have to be you or a family member. They can also apply to this program, and boom, that's it. After that, they are convinced and come all the way through. But I mean, imagine even that. The fact that we can go into communities knowing that they are undocumented families and knowing that we can go and talk to them safely and introduce this program is probably the main reason why people think we're scamming them.
I would say some reasons people say no is like there's still sometimes questions about variability. You know, sun doesn't always shine. So you get that pushback a little bit. Especially Kyle and Sebastian kind of mentioned this, but kind of making sure people understand that when the solar panels, when it's cloudy or maybe there's a maintenance issue at the solar farm, does not mean you can't turn on your lights. And people think that, you know, and so you have to clarify that your savings are going to be less, but you know, if power goes out, that's an Excel and how Excel is managing the grid and all their challenges about reliability. But that's reason people say no. Something that I did not expect was going to happen, but like most people, I think, feel like their energy costs are high and want to improve it. But some people feel like their energy costs are manageable and they've done a good enough job about, you know, managing those or whatever. They feel very comfortable in knowing what their bill is going to be every month, and they just don't want to change at all. Like they don't want to they don't feel the savings is worth it or whatever. And that was something I should have probably thought about that in advance, but there were people that were just like, I don't need it, and the savings is just not worth any sort of change. So that was a challenge, I think, at times. Like we went into Cimarron, like there's 300-ish units there, and we set a goal of like 30 signups. And I remember talking to like Sebastian about this, and we were being like, "Oh, we're gonna hit this." We're gonna hit this. This is such a like easy goal or whatever. And no, it was not. Like we had to really, really work. And I think that goes down to just the communities. Like it was a lot easier to build trust in Landfall, I think, than it was in Cimarron, and just kind of how they work. So
Yeah. And how interesting that Landfall had more trustworthy leadership than Cimarron. So we had less of a barrier to get past. One of the things that we explain to people when they're looking at this through their kind of usual lens of how they look at electricity coming to them, like if it's always proportional what they pay us out of their bill credit. If a bunch of volcanic ash fell on the array and it didn't produce anything for a month, they also wouldn't pay us anything because it's always proportional. And so that helps alleviate some of the concerns about, well, what if it doesn't produce and I have to pay you anyway? Or, it's like, well, the beauty of it is that you don't.
Is that actually the same structure required for other developers? Because that actually is new to me. I don't think I've even known that that's a way that you could structure payments for people so that even in a, it's like you said, a dramatic situation, they would still not have to pay any additional.
Right. Because it's, they're paying us a portion of their savings. So if there are no savings, and that also got written into the new now Melissa Hortman Community Solar Program in Minnesota, that developers, and I believe everyone has to save at least 10%, which was not the case before. I mean, people could join a community solar garden and not save a thing. They have always saved with us in the LMI gardens, but now that's in statute.
Yeah, they have to have a 10% discount off the credit rate. So that's a whole other challenge too, is explaining a discount versus savings off their bill. And like, that's a different thing. Kind of like what you were saying, John, about like, we can't tell them what their energy costs are going to be. We can't tell them exactly what the credit is going to be discount when you think about those costs. And so we try not to dive too much into those weeds and try to just kind of talk broadly, I guess. But yeah, that savings guarantee is huge. Yeah, because we can, people understand there's all these variables and risks and stuff, and we don't try to hide that. We say like, yeah, the sun can shine and things can go wrong, but like you're protected when those things happen. So CF, like kind of like the subscriber minimums, like that's the minimum that a developer can charge, but we try to go above and beyond that. We really try to give them as much of their credit as they can possibly get without us going bankrupt. And I think people kind of see that. So
I want to do a follow up with you about the outreach because one of the things I'm curious about, you talk about this process of building trust. You are often going like a project at a time, right? Like you have a specific physical location. This is where the panels are going to be. This is how many panels and how much energy you have for people to subscribe to. Does that ever give you an opportunity to sort of like come back then to like Cimarron or Landfall with a subsequent project? Now you have a bunch of people who can testify, no, this was for real. I was skeptical too. They talked me through this. They explained the bill credit, the consolidated billing. Check it out. Like I've saved $50 in the last 3 months or something. Have you had communities like that where you've been able to go back and now it's that much easier because you've established a reputation of being trustworthy?
I would say yes and no. The no aspect of it is that there's been so much demand for these projects and not enough supply. And so I think Sebastian and Kyle will attest to this, that like on these next projects we're building, I wholeheartedly feel like we're going to go back to these communities and say like, hey, do you want more panels if they can have it? Or like your neighbor didn't get on the first time, let's make sure you get on. But there's a big time lag to that, which can be challenging. The yes part of it was we did for our first projects. Kyle mentioned Park Plaza. And so we have worked with rock communities before and kind of have this established process. So we did go back and get some people from those parks, which was awesome to do that. But there was some, and I don't want to go into the weeds of this, but I'm sure, as you know, John, there's been different solar policies and different rules. And so that was a bit tricky, is trying to have to be like, yeah, your neighbor was part of this thing and they get paid this rate or whatever with this project, but we're going to put you in this one with this rate and these rules. But overall, it was great to be able to go back to some of those people and help more of those communities. Because like these parks are big and like there's plenty need, and like, yeah, there's way more help that we can do with more people we can sign up. So,
And I guess I would like to add that there are already many folks from the parks that are on our wait list at the moment. And therefore, when there is availability in our gardens and in the future, once we have new gardens coming up, those are the first people that we are contacting and that we are signing up. So yes, we will go back and we are often in contact with folks.
Well, I just want to say thanks so much for coming to really do a deep dive on how you're reaching residents of these particular communities, but just in general, helping to make community solar more accessible. I really liked and wasn't even expecting this in how we planned this podcast, getting to learn a little bit more about what it's like at the door, talking to people about this and how ordinary folks are experiencing the outreach that goes into this. I was going to ask you, what would you want to tell members of the Public Utilities Commission or legislators about these projects? But I feel like you've already answered that question. You've said like, this is what is giving people a chance to benefit from solar. This is the way that you can design it in that with this cooperative ownership model that really aligns with the way in which these communities can have very tight knit and intentional relationships among the members of the community. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add as a sign off, but I feel like you've already answered that question very well.
If I had to directly speak to the Public Utilities Commission or staff of the Public Utilities Commission, I would ask them to try to explore aligning with community, because they have explored aligning with utilities time and time again, and we have gone this far. And this far for a lot of community members means burden. There are a lot of folks that may actually live on the streets at the moment due to the utility reality. And so, as the Public Utilities Commission, let's try to align ourselves with the public for the future.
Yeah, and just know that we have hundreds of people waiting we have 300 people just on one of our waiting lists, along with hundreds more that are waiting for this opportunity. And we need Excel and the Public Utilities Commission and the legislature to support in whatever way they can people getting there. And knowing that this could be a whole deep dive unto itself.
I would say a few things because what I've said is like this new law was so helpful, but also you can do so much more. And so some things that I feel like I noticed was, and I think Kyle would actually be able to speak to this a little bit better, is, we had some challenges communicating what gardens were going to come online and like miss like credits being not delivered right. So I think holding the utilities accountable when mistakes do happen. And I feel like they just kind of let them, fix that, please, whatever. And like, we're like, that's hard to communicate to people because we've built that relationship and they think we're at fault when there's nothing we can do. So holding them accountable, like when we've done our part. So really holding them accountable for when they make mistakes. Kyle talked about how the 150% area median income threshold is not like really low income. So, maybe thinking about even being more aggressive with those targets to really help people. And I would also add too that like they can help, like they can't choose which provider. So they have to be tricky about that. They can't have one favorite developer. But I do think like energy assistance providers can be made more aware of this and be more like help facilitate. Like if you want to explore this for people that apply for your energy assistance, here's who you can contact. Because right now it's like these developers that have to reach out independently. And I think they can really facilitate that more. And then I think the last thing I'd say is recently there's been all these concerns about fraud and things like that. But like we really pushed for self-attestation for proof of income, because I think that's something I forgot to mention is that like probably a barrier for people is if they have so much going on, it's a decent amount of paperwork. Like it just is like that they have to sign. It's less than energy assistance, but it's still a good amount of paperwork, and getting that proof of income can be a big challenge. And especially when they've put the proof of income threshold is so high, like it's just a burden that I feel doesn't need to be there. It would have sped things up so much if we could have just had them sign a form that said they attest to this. So, re-looking at that, and I know there's studies of things out there. I think Kyle and Sebastian and I have looked at that about just how much more accessible programs are when they're willing to make that step. So I have a lot of things to say, but those are three things that, if they did that, it'd make my life and everybody's life easier, I think.
Yeah. And we would love to take a deeper dive into this with you with Puya Najmai, our policy director at CEF, because he has a whole lot. And he said this could be a podcast unto itself.
Absolutely. Well, Bryn and Kyle and Sebastian, thank you so much for joining me. This is just such a great conversation. It's lovely to hear about all the people that are getting help on their bills with community solar and doing it as part of a cooperative where they're also owners who get to show up and decide how any profits get spent or how their community shapes these programs. So thanks for your work. And yeah, thanks so much for taking the time today. It was great to talk with you.
Yes. Well said, John. Thank you too.
Appreciate it.
And shout out to ILSR.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Local Energy Rules with three staff at Cooperative Energy Futures: Outreach Director Kyle Samajima, Outreach Representative Sebastian Rivera, and former Outreach Representative Bryn Shang. On the show page, look for a link to my Local Energy Rules podcast with Jeannie Oliver, episode 235, about serving resident-owned communities with community solar in New Hampshire, as well as links to our wide range of community solar resources, including our quarterly tracker of its growth, our deep dive on every state's policy, and much, much more. Local Energy Rules is produced by myself and Ingrid Burson, with editing provided by audio engineer Drew Berschbach. Tune back into Local Energy Rules every 2 weeks to hear how we can take on concentrated power to transform the energy system. Until next time, keep your energy local, and thanks for listening.